on the air with Ukraine's capital still very much under threat in this war. That's the word from the Pentagon, even though Russia says it's pulling back from Kyiv. Up ahead, why the U.S. thinks Vladimir Putin is being lied to by his own advisors. And a look at my conversation with the parents of a Marine trapped in Russia here in D.C. to try to convince the president to meet them. Their message as they fight to get their son home. Plus, the weather's going from bad to worse down south. With a tornado touching down in Arkansas, we've got to look at who else is in this storm's path tonight. And with hundreds of Americans dying from accidental shootings, one company's trying to make a so-called smart gun. We're going to show you this tech that's been years in the making in tonight's original. Plus, some new hope for immigrants tonight with the Biden administration, according to sources, set to end a pandemic policy that's kept people seeking asylum out. And it's coming just in time for some Ukrainian families coming to the U.S. The behind-the-scenes story of how NBC News got an exclusive conversation with one of those families in tonight's backstory. And a stunning diagnosis for one of the most famous actors in the world. Have you heard about this? Bruce Willis stepping away from acting after learning he has aphasia. We're taking a closer look at that later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie. And a day after the U.S. was saying, hey, don't trust Russia because they're lying about pulling back from Ukrainian cities, turns out looks like they're right, with Ukrainian officials reporting dozens of new attacks now in Kyiv and like what you're about to see here in Chernihiv. The governor of that area says Russia has spent hours today hitting civilian targets. And the Pentagon calling this so not a withdrawal. Listen.
If the Russians are serious about de-escalating, because that's their claim here, then they should send them home. But they're not doing that. The airstrikes have not stopped, not at all. So Kyiv, as I said yesterday, is still very much under threat.
And you know who else is apparently being lied to? This guy, Vladimir Putin himself, with the Pentagon, confirming that the U.S. thinks the Russian president's getting bad info about the war from his advisors. Why? Because they're worried that Putin's going to retaliate against them if he finds out about the poor performance of his military. And at this moment of extraordinary tension with Russia, new questions now about Americans detained there, like WNBA superstar Brittany Griner and like former Marine Trevor Reed. In a second, we'll show you my conversation with his parents, who spent their day today outside the White House, hoping to talk with President Biden about their son, who's on a hunger strike in a Russian prison. But I want to get right to Hallie in Lviv, Ukraine. So, Hallie, you've got this top Ukrainian general saying some Russian units are moving away from Kyiv, away from Chernihiv. But the situation in the east seems to be maybe getting worse because of that. Talk us through what's happening on the ground.
Hi, Hallie. That's right. Well, firstly, it doesn't look like they're making any dramatic withdrawals around Kyiv, maybe very small deployments of troops, possibly on a rotation, just to get a rest, because a lot of those guys have been here fighting for over a month, and they've been getting battered. But as you pointed out, the focus may shift to the east, to the Donbass region, which they've been saying that they want to now emphasize their attacks on. And just now we heard from President Zelensky saying that this country is preparing, that he's seen large troop movements of Russians heading to the Donbass area. So that's probably going to be a shift of focus. Is going to see a lot more shelling and missiling in that area for the Russians to try to take control of. But even in the north of the country, I mean, they're pounding Chernihiv every day. Last night they said that they were going to leave the Chernihiv area. They didn't leave the Chernihiv area. They just sent more missiles into that place. They're trying to encircle it, and poor old Chernihiv shares a border not with Russia and Belarus. So they're probably in for a really hard time in the coming days and weeks.
You also have the diplomatic effort, or at least the resupply effort, if you will, from the U.S. to Ukraine, with President Biden talking with President Zelensky of Ukraine for almost an hour today, right, about this idea of handing over another $500 million in money, in aid money that would go directly to Ukrainians. When you talk to people on the ground right now, how plugged into what they are and are not getting from the West are they?
They're extraordinarily plugged in. As I mentioned, Zelensky just put out a video address a few minutes before we came on air, and I'm sure all the Ukrainians are watching that. They're listening very closely to everything he has to say, and you hear them reiterate everything he says to the U.S. president, to NATO, that, you know, we need our airspace closed. We need those S-300 defensive systems. We need those MiGs that are in Poland. We need tanks to be given to us. And they'll reiterate exactly what Zelensky says. They said, well, our president said that those tanks they're not giving to us. Well, we're willing to pay for for them. So they're extremely plugged into what Zelensky has to say. And I've got to tell you, Hallie, a lot of the people you spoke to here, they tell me that they didn't vote for Zelensky the first time around. They didn't take him seriously as an actor, but now he's a national hero to them, and they hang on every word that he says. So they're very, very in tune with everything he has to say, and that's where they get a lot of their information from.
And at this moment of extraordinary tension, right, between the U.S. and Russia, you have this spotlight now being put on Americans who are detained in that country. A couple of hours ago, not even, I had an opportunity to talk with the parents of Trevor Reed. They want a meeting with President Biden. They're here in Washington. They were demonstrating outside the White House today. They want to try to get their son home. And I talked to them about what they'd like to ask the president. Take a listen.
We believe that this administration needs to start seriously considering a trade for these Americans and get them out of there before they either die from the horrid conditions or they have additional charges put on them and they're there forever.
And that will be your direct ask to President Biden if and when you meet with him in the next 24
and not just for Trevor and Paul and Brittany, but there's 50 other families that have loved ones being held overseas in other countries who also have prisoners they want back.
Paula Reed, they're referring to WNBA star Brittany Griner, of course, and the detained American Paul Whelan, who's been accused by Russia of spying. You know, this clearly caught President Biden's attention because he referenced this today, saying he knows they're in town, looking to try to have a meeting with them sometime very soon in the next maybe day or so. It is yet another sort of layer on top of these discussions that the U.S. is having and is thinking about as it relates to Russia.
That's right, and it's also straight out of an authoritarian's playbook. They will take people in their country that are having problems with another country, and they'll put undue pressure on them. They'll put trumped-up charges against them. Usually, they keep them in terrible conditions. They don't get medical attention. They're kept in solitary confinement until they can extract something from the country that they're at odds with, whether it's money or another high-value asset that's been taken in another country, straight out of an authoritarian's playbook to try and gain leverage against the country that you're not getting on very well with.
Hallie Arouzi, live for us in Lviv. Hallie, good to see you. Thank you. Back here at home in just the last hour, we've learned at least 7 people were hurt after a tornado ripped through a town in northwest Arkansas. Check this out. You're about to see it. It's from Springdale. Oh, look at that drone video. You can see power lines are down. The roof of that house, man, that is torn to shreds. Stores are damaged pretty badly. It looks like that used to be a bridge. The city's mayor says a lot of people were forced out of their houses. Thousands of them still don't have power. And this, what you're looking at, that's just a snapshot of the kind of severe weather we're seeing all across the country. Right now, more than 29 million of us are in the path of potentially dangerous thunderstorms, with our weather team monitoring a string of them, threatening cities like Memphis, Nashville, Birmingham, Atlanta, just tonight in the next few hours. I want to bring in Al Roker, who's breaking everything down for us here. This tornado touchdown report in northeast Louisiana this afternoon has come in. You've got New Orleans, you've got Baton Rouge, both in the path of severe conditions after they've been hit badly. Talk to us about what you're expecting to see tonight.
Yeah, unfortunately, Hallie, when we joined you 24 hours ago, we were worried about this scenario, and unfortunately, it is coming to pass. And in fact, you can see this area in pink outline. That's the tornado watch. But these areas in red, right along the Illinois border, also along the Missouri and Arkansas borders, and coming down into parts of Mississippi. We are looking at tornado warnings now, firing up as this system makes its way to the east. 29 million people at risk right now. Widespread damage from wind likely. Strong tornadoes are likely, especially the southern end of this system. Hail to 1 inch or more. The storm impact. There could be wind gusts of 80 miles per hour, Hallie, in this area in blue. That includes Memphis, Huntsville, Birmingham, Hattiesburg, New Orleans, Mobile, and Montgomery. This damage from these winds could extend hundreds of miles and extensive power outages possible. We are likely seeing EF2 or stronger tornadoes developing in this region. Long track tornadoes, and these would be happening tonight as well. And as we've mentioned, nighttime nocturnal tornadoes twice as deadly as their daytime counterparts. And the other problem has been these are the same areas that got hit last week, last Tuesday, with those tornadoes and those severe winds. So these folks have already been taking the brunt of this. There's going to be more on the way. For tonight, the line will stretch from Cleveland all the way down into the panhandle of Florida, making its way to the east, the Ohio River Valley, into the Gulf Coast. Tomorrow, it makes its way along the eastern seaboard from New York all the way down to Tallahassee. We're talking 33 million people at risk, Hallie, for damaging winds, hail, and tornadoes possible. Then it pushes through, and as it does, we look for that afternoon risk making its way through here. The heaviest rain is going to be situated in the lower Mississippi River Valley, Hallie, where we're talking 3 inches or more. So besides the winds, besides the tornadoes, there could also be flash flooding as well.
Man, you got a lot of people getting ready for a potentially scary night tonight, Al. Thank you for being on top of that. We'll look for more from you tomorrow morning on Today. Appreciate it. So, former President Trump seems to be at it again today, leaning into his explosive call for Vladimir Putin to release dirt on Hunter Biden. In a new statement just this afternoon saying Russia, in time, might be willing to play ball on just that. That's after he made that request to Putin on a TV show yesterday. And now we're getting new reaction today from Democrats like House Intelligence Chair Adam Schiff, who's telling our own Garrett Haake the former president is, in the congressman's words, consistently immoral and unpatriotic. Listen.
This man, Donald Trump, cannot change. He will not change. He is who he is. He will always seek to cheat. He will always seek to get foreign help.
So what exactly is this dirt that the former president wants Vladimir Putin to hand over? It has to do with unproven claims that President Biden's son got $3.5 million from the widow of a late mayor of Moscow. There's no proof that actually happened or that the Kremlin would even have that information. Hunter Biden's legal team told NBC News in 2020 the claim he was paid $3.5 million was false. Garrett Haake, who you just saw in that interview with Adam Schiff, is joining us now to talk more about this. So, Garrett, help us understand, if you can, why Donald Trump is right now at this very sensitive diplomatic moment with Putin, who is perpetrating a war in Ukraine, choosing to try to inject himself into the conversation this way.
It's always dangerous to try to understand the mind of Donald Trump on some of these issues, but Hunter Biden and his laptop have been back in the news recently, and Mr. Trump and a lot of the folks around him still remain upset that the media, the rest of the country, didn't take their claims about Hunter Biden seriously in the lead up to the 2020 election. And so here you have a series of little bits of news that have come out. He gets asked in an interview, and it's an opportunity to link together two of the topics that he's been very focused on: Hunter Biden and his view that there's some kind of corruption there, and the questions that have always swirled around Trump and his relationship with Vladimir Putin, and the statement that he put out after the fact today, trying to clean those things up. But this is kind of par for the course. When he gets hung up on an idea like this, it's going to come out in any context, regardless of what's going on in the rest of the world.
You mentioned Hunter Biden, back in the news, basically, with some headlines over the last couple of weeks. Talk us through this federal investigation into some of Hunter Biden's business activities. It's still happening. Where does it stand?
We don't know a lot about it, Hallie, is the bottom line.
Yeah.
This is a DOJ investigation that could include things like tax fraud. It could include various elements of Hunter Biden's business dealings, either in Ukraine or in other foreign countries. It dovetails with reporting that's been coming out recently from the Washington Post, from CNN, and the Post story today talking about their efforts to verify elements on that laptop. We, from the outside, don't know which of these are going to be part of a DOJ investigation that we do know is happening, and which are just kind of chaff that has been put out here in kind of the political discussion about Hunter Biden and his relationship with his father.
It feels like part of the reason, Garrett, and you did the interview, so you tell me, that we saw Congressman Schiff so fired up is because this isn't the first time that Donald Trump has called on Putin to do something to a political rival, right? In what I think some political observers saw as this absolutely extraordinary moment back in 2016 when the former president, then a candidate, very infamously said, Vladimir Putin, if you have info on Hillary Clinton's hacked emails, Russia should release it. It's a little bit of deja vu.
Not only is it deja vu of that incident from the 2016 campaign, focusing on Hillary Clinton, which, by the way, we did learn after the fact that the Russians did start some of their hacking operation on that very same day. But there was also an entire impeachment about this kind of thing back in 2019 when it was Vladimir Zelensky, who we all now know, who this was sort of his first moment on the world stage when we learned that President Trump had called him asking for information about Hunter Biden in exchange for some of the very same military equipment that's now proven critical to the defense of Ukraine. Everything old is new again here, Hallie, and I think that was some of the frustration from Adam Schiff, who, as the lead impeachment manager in that impeachment in 2019, was trying to make exactly the argument that Donald Trump would do this kind of thing again, and here we are.
Is this getting any traction with the Republicans you're talking to, Garrett, or not so much?
Not a lot. I mean, as was always the case in the Trump years, most of them prefer not to talk about this kind of thing. I've heard two general reactions. One from some Republicans saying we should not be asking Putin for anything right now. Yeah. Others saying, hey, you know, we're curious about this Hunter Biden investigation and we want to know more. So not a ton of traction on this.
Garrett Haake live for us on the Hill. Garrett, good to see you. Thanks for being on. Appreciate it. Other big news coming out of Washington today. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will have at least one Republican on her side when her confirmation vote to become a Supreme Court justice happens. Maine Senator Susan Collins, who's saying Judge Jackson's experience and credentials have earned her support. She is the only Republican so far that we know of to join what we expect to be all Democrats in supporting Judge Jackson for that Supreme Court slot. When she made this announcement today, she also kind of took a dig at her colleagues, saying the Senate's role is, in her words, not to assess whether a nominee reflects the ideology of an individual senator or would rule exactly as an individual senator would want, but more about whether they could be right for the court. The Senate hopes to vote on Judge Jackson's confirmation by April 8th. You know, we'll be watching that when that happens. Not too long ago, actually, just a couple hours ago, a Connecticut judge found conspiracy theorist Alex Jones in contempt of court. Why? For not showing up for depositions 2 days in a row last week over this lawsuit filed by Sandy Hook families. That means starting this Friday, he's going to be fined $25,000, and that number keeps going up for every day he does not sit for a deposition. Jones is being sued by these families over his totally false, totally made-up claims that the shooting that killed 21st graders was a, quote, giant hoax. Obviously, it was not. Jones tried to settle with the families just yesterday by offering them $120,000 each, but they rejected that pretty quick. His excuse for not attending the depositions last week, Jones said he was following doctor's orders because he wasn't feeling very well. Vertigo, a sinus infection. He still taped his show the day after he was supposed to be in court, though. Kate Snow is joining us now on this story. Kate, bring us up to speed on where this goes from here, right? Because this is big money that Jones is going to face for not showing up for this deposition. And I know that for Sandy Hook families, this is, you know, very emotional and important to them.
Yeah, and Hallie, you laid it out there. So the judge today in this hearing that was less than an hour, and it was virtual, she listened patiently to Jones's attorney, but she was clearly frustrated. I mean, she basically said, look, you have tried to kind of put one over on this court. She said in her words that she was putting Alex Jones on notice, saying that he intentionally failed to justify why he didn't show up last week for those two depositions. It was supposed to be on Wednesday. They pushed it to Thursday because he said he wasn't feeling well. He didn't show up Thursday either. He was under court order, Hallie, to show up, and he didn't. So again, this is something where he's now going to face, starting Friday, $25,000, and then each day it goes up, each work day, it goes up another $25,000. So if he doesn't sit by next week, you know, it's going to start adding up, $50,000, $75,000, and so on. The judge basically said you need to do this before April 15th. His own lawyer said, well, he's really busy next week. Maybe he could sit the week of the 11th, Hallie.
So, Kate, one of the reasons why this is so impactful for these families who are, you know, still grieving the loss of their loved ones, of their kids, right, is because they say they've been harassed. Some of them say they've gotten death threats over the years because of the absolutely crazy stuff that Alex Jones has said on his show about the shooting.
Yeah, I've kept in touch with a lot of those families. I was actually there on the day of the shooting almost 10 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. But yeah, Hallie, you're absolutely right. I mean, they've had to hide their addresses. They have to be very careful about going on vacation now. One family said, I think he said they moved 10 times because their address kept getting published by folks associated with InfoWars. So that is at the heart of this claim. It's a defamation suit that these families have filed in Connecticut. And by the way, there are other suits in Texas from other families that were filed there that are sort of the same idea. So both of these cases are set to head toward trial as early as this summer in Connecticut. The judge said today, she basically said, like, if you think we're moving this case, we're not. We're starting in August. So if you don't get the deposition done, there might be other repercussions for Alex Jones and his defense if they don't move quickly to get that deposition done.
We mentioned how Jones has said, okay, he had the sinus infection, et cetera, but then he was, you know, doctors had said this was pretty serious stuff, according to Jones and his attorneys. He still taped his show, right? Like, he still showed up to do that. And then you have the lawyers for these families who are saying, you know, we actually want him arrested. Is that going to happen? I mean, the judge obviously didn't do that today, but, like, is that something that's still on the table?
Yeah, and by the way, Alex Jones was on the air again this morning, and the judge criticized the doctor's note that was written last week. It's unclear. Look, his attorneys are arguing that he does have ongoing health issues and that there should be some leniency here. Obviously, today, the judge did not decide to go with arresting him, favoring the fines that we've laid out. But I think everything's on the table if he doesn't sit for a deposition soon. Hallie.
Kate Snow, thank you so much. You heard about this. It seems like it's everywhere today. He is stepping away from acting after being diagnosed with aphasia. If you're not familiar with this, it's a condition that affects the brain and can rob a person of their ability to communicate, to speak, to write, to understand language. Willis's daughter, Rumor, announced this news on Instagram, saying that the aphasia has affected her dad's cognitive abilities, but she added, as Bruce always says, live it up, and together we plan to do just that. You know, living it up is what Willis has done in his career. He's the engine, the big star behind movies like The Sixth Sense, Pulp Fiction, and of course is the detective John McClane in the Die Hard series, whose most famous quote is not something I can say on TV, not even on streaming. Let me bring in Dr. Jorn Torres, who is with us now. John, Bruce Willis was in a bunch of movies. Like, he's got more stuff coming out. This feels, I think, to a lot of people a little bit sudden. Talk to us about this condition. What is it? How quickly can it come on?
And Hallie, like you mentioned there, aphasia is a communication issue where you either have problems understanding what other people are saying, trying to communicate to you, or you have problems communicating with other people. You sometimes can form the words, but you can't get them out. You can't get them to that person, or sometimes it's a combination of the two. And it can actually happen in two different areas. One is the acute aphasia, meaning it happens within a couple minutes or a few hours. And that's usually from brain damage because of a stroke or severe head injury, those types of conditions. Then there's the slow type of aphasia, more progressive aphasia, and that can be from infections, that degenerative process, think dementia when I mention that, or tumors that grow and slowly give you that inability to communicate. But like they mentioned here, you know, it can be a cognitive issue, meaning he could be having a dementia type issues that's causing atrophy of the brain, which can cause this type of condition as well, this aphasia. And obviously being an actor, communication is a big deal with him. And I think that's why the word is getting out. His daughter is putting the word out there and trying to help people understand this as best as possible.
That's right. I mean, speech and language and communication is so important to what Bruce Willis does. Is it recoverable, Dr. John? Like, is it possible that down the road we could see Bruce Willis, and again, knowing you're not his doctor, obviously, right? We only know what we've heard from his daughter, but is it possible we could see him recover from this and get back on the stage and back on the screen?
You know, it's possible, but I don't think we're going to see Bruce Willis that we saw 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, because the way you recover from this is through therapy. There's no cure for it, but it's basically speech type therapy you recover from. And that happens if you have the stroke type or the type from a brain injury. That can happen fairly rapidly, and you can gain some of that, if not all the function back. But if it's more of a progressive one, which it sounds like that's what Bruce Willis has, especially if it's associated with the cognitive issues she's talking about, the dementia type issues, then that tends to progress. There's no cure for it, but you can improve things to a certain extent, but not nearly to the extent it was before. So, you know, could he go back to acting? Definitely, because of the way they put those pieces together. He might be able to do something on a limited basis, but probably not like he was doing, like I mentioned, 5 or 10 years ago, Hallie.
Dr. John Torres, thank you so much for bringing us that perspective and that expertise. Appreciate it. Coming up. Is Facebook paying a Republican firm to try to take down TikTok? Well, that's exactly what a new report says, and they got the receipts. We're going to talk about more on what we know after the break. And TurboTax sued over its ads, while the FCC says the company's quote-unquote free software is actually a bait and switch. That's next in the 5 Things. New reporting tonight on this social scheme involving the parent company of Facebook, Meta. And this Washington Post reporting that the company is paying a Republican firm to basically dig up dirt or try to spread bad info about competitor TikTok. The Post says Meta's been working with Targeted Victory, this GOP firm, to show, in their view, that TikTok's a huge danger for kids. One campaign director saying a, quote, dream would be to get stories with headlines like "From Dances to Danger." There's more. They're asking local reporters to push anti-TikTok stories, putting letters to the editor in some of these regional outlets. One ran in the Denver Post from a, quote, new parent saying many people suspect China is deliberately collecting behavioral data on our kids, adding we should all be alarmed. Last year, Facebook researchers said teens were spending 2 to 3 times more time on TikTok than Instagram, and Facebook's popularity among the youths, among the young people, has plummeted. CNBC's Julia Borston joins me now on this story. Julia, you know, I live in Washington. I cover Washington politics. I'm used to seeing Oppo, right, and like Oppo research on candidates. It's interesting here to see a tech company, it seems, doing something similar, and particularly a tech company that has been plagued by misinformation all over its platform, now trying to spread information about a competitor.
Well, what Facebook and the firm that they were working with would say is that this was not misinformation they were spreading, but that they were doing what was necessary to alert the public, to alert the media of some challenges at their rival. And I do have to mention a quote, a tweet from the head of the PR firm that they were working with. He says today's Washington Post story not only mischaracterizes the work we do, but key points are simply false. We tried to reach out to the Washington Post to further talk through them, but never got a response. And he talks about these concerns. So of course, the PR firm, worth noting that they are denying that anything they did was untoward.
This seems to be stemming too, and you cover business, Julia, so we're glad to have you on this, on the business of social media, because TikTok is humongous. It's the most downloaded app in the world, right? Second place, Instagram. Like, you have to wonder, I mean, at least I wonder, how much does the business competition piece play into why Meta was is being so aggressive on this front?
I think it totally plays into it. I mean, you have Instagram, which, though very popular, is facing growing competition. And don't forget, Facebook has been struggling, especially with those younger users. And a lot of that is because of the success of TikTok. The other key thing about TikTok is it's owned by a Chinese company. As all of the tech giants face increased regulation, increased scrutiny in Washington, they all point to the fact that, hey, you're going to be disadvantaging these U.S.-based companies if you don't apply the same rules to the Chinese-based companies, such as TikTok. Who knows what kind of data they're collecting, et cetera. There's been a lot of conversation about that. And of course, TikTok has defended itself. But there is this big red flag that's gone up about the parent company of TikTok being based in China.
You read the statement from Targeted Victory. Let me read what we heard from Meta, a spokesperson to the Washington Post defending this campaign, saying, "We believe all platforms, including TikTok, should face a level of scrutiny consistent with their growing success." Julie, they're pretty unapologetic about this.
Meta is pretty unapologetic about this, and I think it's just been so interesting to see what's gone on here with these rivals. Look, and you've seen TikTok continue to grow. You've seen Instagram hold on strong, but not be as fast growing as TikTok. And then you see Facebook struggling. And then amid all of this, you have the fact that TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. And back in the Trump administration, remember when the Trump administration was trying to get TikTok's parent to sell the company because they were concerned about all the data that was getting sent back to China? I know some people at Facebook and Meta would be happy if those conversations emerged again, because there is this question like, hey, why aren't you looking at these guys as closely as you're looking at us?
And by the way, there is this concern, right? And I've done reporting on this and talked with parents and experts on this about generally social media dangers for kids, right? Like there is something fundamental about any social media platform and its youngest users.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, there was this expose that came out from the Facebook whistleblower in the fall, and she revealed internal documents that showed that people inside Meta were concerned about the implications of social media on children. This is something that Meta has really been trying to address. They know that parents are concerned. They're facing scrutiny about potentially launching an Instagram for kids. They know that there are all of these questions about whether or not just being on social platforms is just bad for teens. Of course, children are not supposed to be on it, although there's some question about whether or not they have access. So the question really, I think, is how much is TikTok addressing these issues? We've read and seen a lot about what Meta and Facebook are doing, but there's a lot less transparency into what TikTok is doing.
Julia Borston, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, 8 United Nations peacekeepers were killed after a helicopter crashed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They were out there on a military mission when the chopper went down in an area where there's been rebel fighting. Officials are still trying to figure out why exactly that happened. Number 2, thousands of people have been forced out of their homes. Look at this, as floods rip through Australia's east coast. It's the second time in just a few weeks that floods forced people to leave. Officials say this current is really strong. It's bursting riverbanks, it's breaking over levees, etc. Number 3, 21 states are suing the CDC and other federal agencies over mask mandates on public transportation, like the planes you fly on. It's a lawsuit that was filed in Florida, and it says people should have the right to do things like fly without masks. The CDC says no comment on that suit just yet. Number 4, the Federal Trade Commission is suing the TurboTax owner Intuit for its advertising of its software as free. Here's the deal. The FTC says the free version of this tax software is actually a bait and switch because most people who use it are actually charged when you go to file your return. Intuit says the agency's claims are not credible, but boy, is this timely with the tax deadline just a few weeks away. Number 3, if you're a fan of guacamole, and who isn't, I expect all of you to be riveted by this. A new study says 2 servings a week of avocado can actually cut your risk of heart attack by 21%. That's compared to people who don't eat them at all. To be clear, that's if you eat them instead of fats like butter or cheese, so maybe whip up a little avocado toast for breakfast tomorrow. Still ahead. Some Ukrainians are hoping to find safety here in the U.S. We're talking with a family who got asylum at the Mexico border and tonight's backstory. Plus, in an NBC News exclusive, we'll bring you a behind-the-scenes look at the country's Space Force. Tom Costello joins me next with more on what he saw behind the scenes and the race to weaponize space. NASA today welcoming one of its astronauts back to Earth, Mark Vande Hei, who now holds the record for the longest U.S. spaceflight at just shy of a year, 355 days on the International Space Station. He and 2 fellow crewmates, Russian cosmonauts, landed in Kazakhstan. And what was interesting, a rare moment of unity during this war in Ukraine. They were met by both American and Russian personnel. Space, at least in this moment, proving to be a topic they can agree on here. But even with that diplomacy, the U.S. is really worried about potential Russian attacks in space or attacks from China, too. NBC News got an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at America's Space Force, the newest branch of the armed forces, and a place that very few people have ever seen during a time when the race to weaponize space is speeding up. And Vladimir Putin is putting his nuclear forces on high alert. The U.S. military says the stakes could not be higher. You see Tom Costello in that shot. You see Tom Costello here because he is joining us now for more on this exclusive. It's so interesting, Tom, because, again, Space Force was just created under the Trump administration. Our cameras were among the first to go inside this, like, satellite ops center. And you talked with some of these guardians, which is what their members are called. Tell us about it.
That's right. I mean, as the Navy calls sailors, Space Force calls their personnel guardians, both enlisted personnel and officers. We were invited to the Space Force Satellite Command Center in Colorado Springs and also to the adjacent GPS Command Center there, where they watch over every single one of the military satellites orbiting, as well as every single one of the U.S. military GPS satellites. As you probably know, the military is who put up our GPS network about 25 years ago or so. Their job is to watch every single satellite for any chance or any observation of interference. And what's staggering here is that the commanding generals of Space Force, and they include, by the way, PhDs in astrophysics and aeronautical engineering. I mean, these are real brainiacs. People, yeah. They are convinced, and they tell me that they are dealing every single day with harassing behavior by Russian and Chinese satellites, obviously directed from the ground, harassing our satellites. And what really worries them is the militarization of space. We've already seen Russia and China detonate a missile, shoot a missile and detonate and destroy their own satellites in space, creating massive debris fields. And why would you do that if you're not trying to test your offensive capability in space and send a message? And they are worried about that. They're also worried that the Chinese appear to be setting up some sort of a robotic military post on the far side of the moon, the dark side of the moon, that we can't see from here. They're very concerned about the pace with which the Chinese are, in fact, militarizing space in terms of satellite operations. And they're very worried that at this pace, the Chinese will overtake the U.S. in less than 8 years.
You have laid out the concerns that they have, right, which are very clear. They also feel, I think to some people, a little intangible because we're talking quite literally about things that are very, very far away. What is their message to Americans who might be looking at this going like, yeah, but it's space. Like, this feels Star Trek-y. This feels Star Warsy.
Well, I think that's why they invited us in. They want to underscore what they believe is a very real ongoing threat, and that already space has become the new domain and a potential battlefield. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to have conflict in space. But because of the offensive capabilities already demonstrated by the Russians and the Chinese, they believe that we have got to be very much aware, our eyes wide open, and I think also they need to make sure that we have the same kind of capabilities, at least in terms of observation and monitoring. And listen, they also make the point that, to some extent, the Steve Carell comedy Space Force hasn't done them any favors, because people immediately think of Space Force as a joke. I got to say, we spent 2 days there about 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It is anything but a joke. They are deadly, deadly serious and very concerned that, in fact, this could be a battlefield in the future.
When you talk about spending time there, one of the things you saw was this mobile satellite control center, which I'm going to put it in super layman's terms, so gut check me if it's wrong, but it kind of feels like the backup generator if everything goes down for the U.S., right?
Yeah,
and it's like a tractor trailer.
Yeah, it's an 18-wheeler. It's one of many that are poised to roll out across the country and immediately reestablish comms, satellite comms, with the president, with the nuclear chain of command, with Air Force One, with the entire military network worldwide. Everybody from the president down to the unit that's on the ground in some remote location. They've got to maintain those comms. So in the event of a doomsday attack on the satellite command center, then they would roll these satellite mobile ops centers out worldwide so they can maintain that chain of command.
It is a fascinating look at something not a lot of people get to see. Tom Costello, we're so glad that you had that story for us tonight. Thank you. He's going to have more, by the way, at this exclusive look into the Space Force tonight on NBC Nightly News. Time now for our backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And tonight, you've got families from Ukraine trying to get into the U.S., with news now coming into us actually right before we came onto the air. The CDC saying that in May, it'll end a policy put in place by the Trump administration that kept immigrants from coming into the U.S., all to try to stop the spread of COVID. This was a pandemic policy. This now could affect Ukrainian families, too, who are looking to get into this country. Antonia Hilton met one of them, a family who was turned away twice at the border between the U.S. and Mexico before finally being granted asylum. They're now living in California with relatives who they hadn't met until just a few weeks ago. Antonia talked with Mom Sophia, who left her extended family behind in Ukraine, and the lawyer who helped them across the border. Watch.
We all had lives, beautiful lives, full of happiness and friends.
It feels like everything's changed in the matter of a couple weeks.
Yes.
They fled Ukraine 3 days after the bombings began, heading for Mexico.
I have family and friends in USA.
But Sophia was turned away by Border Patrol twice.
How did that leave you feeling?
That moment I was really destroyed.
Destroyed, she says. It comes as the UN today says nearly 10% of Ukrainians. Think about that. 1 in 10 people who live in Ukraine have left. 4+ million people out of the country since this war started. I want to bring in now Antonia Hilton, who we're so lucky to have in Washington. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
And you know the backstory, the behind-the-scenes look at how this happens. Tell me a little bit about how you got in touch with this family, what it was like to sort of be with them as they were experiencing this really intense moment.
Well, it really was all up to chance. I happened to reach out to the lawyer who just happened to see them distraught on the border one afternoon while she was there working with a Haitian family. She saw them, helped them get this exemption and the opportunity to cross after their 3rd attempt.
Wow.
And then after I spoke to her on the phone, just trying to get a sense of what was going on with Title 42 at this point,
right,
and how the government was justifying this pandemic-era policy at a time when people are taking off their masks and cities are rolling back most restrictions. And then she happened to tell me about this family, and I said, I have to meet them. And so it was a trust-building process of letting the lawyer know about what our intentions were with this story, about letting the family understand who I am, my history of covering immigration, and it took a couple days, and then we went to their home and met with them.
Do they have any hesitation about it? You know, this is really vulnerable, I think, for a lot of people. Anybody who does, is going to be interviewed by somebody on TV.
Absolutely. And in fact, even the morning when we got there to their home and we were set to do the interview, there was still some hesitation. So I actually took Mom Sophia aside and we had a really frank conversation where I let her know that, yes, I'm the interviewer, but this is your story. So if you need to take a breath, you want to pause for a second, get a sip of water, that's under your control. Yeah. And it was interesting to see how that completely shifted things. I think often when people sit down with reporters, they think, this is live and I need to rush through my answer. And so much is at stake in this couple seconds that I have. And I was like, I'll be here all day if that's what would make you comfortable. Yeah. And so everything shifted in that moment, and we really took it at her pace.
It's so interesting what you described, because it's a lot of what I think like journalism is, right? When you're reporting in the field, it's trust, and then it's sometimes a little bit of luck, which is sort of what you lay out too, that you happen upon them. Did anything, you mentioned you covered immigration a lot. Did anything surprise you about this? Was there anything that you were reporting this out and you went, whoa, that's weird, or I didn't expect that to happen?
Well, I'd say what's most surprising right now, and I think is really going to come into focus now that Title 42 is set to end in a little under 2 months from now,
That's according to sources familiar with that decision.
Yes, and confirmed by NBC. Yeah. And I think what's going to be called into question right now is the fact that the government is currently expediting and fast-tracking people like Sophia, white Ukrainians who are arriving right now on the border and are starting to resettle with their families. And although they've had really traumatizing journeys, in some ways they're the lucky ones. There are Haitian families who were there that day on the border who are still waiting for their chance to cross. Cameroonian families, El Salvadorian families, Honduran families who are also fleeing violence, who have medical ailments, who have worries about political persecution. And they're going to start saying, hey, I know that we have this 2-month window, but what's going on here? What's so different about our circumstances? And I think increasingly it's going to be hard for officials, whether it's the CDC or DHS, to justify this. And I think you're going to see that part of the conversation really come into focus now.
So what are you looking for over the next couple of months as we anticipate Title 42 ending?
Well, first, I want to talk to some of those folks. I'm hoping to get to the border soon to tell some of their stories and to look at what's really happening, because I think something that people don't know about the border is how finicky things can be. Sometimes when you're an immigrant and you show up at the border and you try to exercise your right to ask for asylum, sometimes it's just about the mood of the agent that you get that day. Does that person want to help you? Is that person aware that the Biden administration sent a guidance to give an exemption? And if you just happen to be unlucky that day, you could be turned away and have to start your process all over again. And so getting some of those details out so that people really understand what conditions on the border are really like right now. And it's not just all about this crush of migrants who might be coming and the headlines that we're probably going to see, but the real stories of what people are encountering and what migrants' relationships with our system are really like. That's what I want to cover.
Bring those stories back. We'd love to have you. We'd love to share them here on the show. Thank you. It's good to see you, Antonio. Appreciate it.
You too.
NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Midwest Bureau, prosecutors rested their case today, as expected, against these 4 men charged with plotting to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. It comes after the FBI raided a home in Detroit over alleged threats made to the judge and 2 defense attorneys on the case. No arrests yet in that, but they're trying to figure out who's behind those threats. From our Northeast Bureau, look at this. The roof of a Pennsylvania bowling alley collapsed after this massive fire ripped through it. Happened in my home county of Bucks County. The place was empty when the roof came down, thank goodness, so nobody got hurt. But officials say the whole thing started in a storage area in the back of the building. And from our Washington Bureau, the Coast Guard is still trying to get a stranded ship unstuck in the Chesapeake Bay. The Everford's been there for 2 weeks now, 2 weeks. They got 5 little tugboats they're trying to use to pull it free. That hasn't worked yet. The plan is to take some cargo off the ship before they go in and try again. We want to bring you now tonight's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. You know, gun ownership spiked during the pandemic. Some 20 million guns in the U.S. bought in 2021. And with those sales came more gun accidents. One firearm safety group counted nearly 400 unintentional shootings by children. Last year, they killed 163 people. Now, one company is trying to bring what it calls a smart gun to the market, with the promise that this smart gun new technology will make sure that only the authorized user can actually fire it. The concept itself is not all that new, but the tech is, right? That's why nobody's been able to actually get this product out to people yet. Our Ken Delanian has a closer look at the push to try to make a safer gun. Watch.
A young life snuffed out in seconds. 15-year-old Ethan Song died after accidentally shooting himself with a neighbor's handgun, stored in a closet shoebox. His shattered parents never had a chance to say goodbye.
I wanted to go in and sit with him and, first of all, apologize, because I really felt like I let him down. I felt like my job was to protect my child, and I didn't do that.
And we didn't get that chance at all. The doctor said, it's too grotesque. You can't go in there.
This weapon is designed to prevent such tragedies.
So we did okay.
Ginger Chandler is the chief technology officer at Lodestar Works, one of a few firms developing a so-called smart gun.
We have 3 methods. We use biometric. There's a pin pad on the front of the firearm, and then the Bluetooth technology.
It's Bluetooth. I see. Okay.
Yeah, it just connects, and it's a bonded connection with your phone, and it gives you a way to unlock and lock.
Gareth Glazer is Lodestar's CEO.
You don't have to think about whether you put your gun in the safe. The safe is in the gun, and that's our technology.
Companies have been promising smart guns for years, but it turns out the technology that works on our phones doesn't work as well on guns. But Lodestar says it will be ready.
So when I hear people say, I don't trust technology, I say, well, what'd you take a horse and buggy to work today? No, you drove a car, which is full of technology. That's one answer, is that technology, although it's not perfect, is pretty darn reliable.
Lodestar is one of at least 2 companies trying to bring a smart gun to market after years of unsuccessful attempts. When Smith & Wesson floated the idea in the 1990s as part of a legal settlement, a boycott by gun rights groups nearly took down the company. A German firm tried again a few years ago, but a hacker showed how the gun could easily be unlocked with magnets.
First, the technology isn't there yet.
Larry Keane is the top lobbyist for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. He says his group is not opposed to smart guns, but is dubious that they are workable.
If the battery fails and you cannot use the firearm in a time of need, someone's breaking into your house to commit rape, murder, whatever, that's a bad outcome if you have that firearm for self-protection.
Lodestar's gun can be set to fire if the battery fails. The company acknowledges its tech is not quite ready for market, but says it's close. Lodestar says its smart gun would cost around $900 compared to a typical $600 handgun. But polls show many gun owners might be willing to pay a premium for more safety.
We're proving that it works. You have a right and a responsibility to control your firearms, and you have a right to your firearm, but nobody else has a right to your firearm. And misuse of firearms is the major cause of what's going on right now in terms of gun deaths, whether they're stolen, illegally obtained, or misused even by accident.
When Ethan Song's parents heard about the smart gun, they had a haunting thought.
I was like, oh my God, that would have saved Ethan's life.
My understanding of a smart gun is it knows the owner's fingerprint, and Ethan would not have had that fingerprint. That gun would have simply frozen his hand, and that would have been an amazing moment.
It didn't happen for their son, but they hope it can happen for some other child.
Ken is joining us here now on set. I'm so struck by what we just heard from the Song family there at the end, right? And I know you talked with another mom who is hopeful that this tech could help her family now.
Yeah, our colleague Jordan Winter sat down with a mom whose 17-year-old son killed himself with his father's gun stored in a hallway closet. And if that isn't sad enough, she's now worried about her other 3 children who she knows are sometimes in a house where there's a loaded gun. And she feels like if it was a smart gun, she wouldn't worry. And, you know, the makers of this technology and the people who advocate for it think that if it could save a couple of lives a year, it would be worth it.
Ken Delaney, thank you so much for bringing us this story. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Hallie.
Just before we came on air, this task force out in California on reparations discussed what that would look like for Black Americans in the state after taking the unprecedented step yesterday on voting who exactly would be eligible. Let me just tell you, this is being looked at by the entire country on this issue of reparations. It could serve as a model for everybody else. So here's what this panel in California did. It chose to limit compensation just to Californians who are descendants of free and enslaved Black people who were in the U.S. in the 19th century. In a 5-4 vote, they narrowly rejected a proposal to include all Black people, regardless of their lineage. This is a big deal, right? We talked about it. California's push is the first at this kind of scale after Governor Gavin Newsom, who you see here, signed a bill creating this 2-year reparations task force back in 2020. Steve Patterson is joining us now from L.A. to talk about this. And, Steve, I know there are some developments that are happening even as we've been on the air and as you're sort of reporting this out. Hours of debate. We're talking emotional debate, testy debate on some of these decisions of who would get reparations. What was that like when this was happening?
Heated. It still is. There's no other way to describe it, just as you described. And, you know, for good reason. We're talking about defining the parameters for generations of systematic oppression. You cannot define what that includes.
And who that includes. Yep.
Exactly. Without, you know, a really inherently painful discussion about this country. So that's what it was. That's what it still is. Hours and hours of debate that included argument and direct feedback from the public with a lot of legitimate concerns. Because if you define reparations strictly as a reckoning for descendants of chattel slavery, then you might be inherently ignoring the ripple effects of slavery, right? So racism itself, segregation, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, redlining, education, things that have impacted generations of black people, whether they came in a 17th century slave ship or a 20th century cruise ship. If you make those parameters, though, too wide, then you're going to make a lot of families angry, including people who had no choice, or descendants of people who had no choice but bondage. It was messy. It continues to be messy. Because ultimately we're talking about a question, not a question of payment, but one of justice. And that's so important to the central argument of what could happen, as you said, in the rest of the country.
And to be clear, this isn't some theoretical discussion, right? Like what the task force decides and who they limit eligibility to, et cetera, is going to this is going to move forward, right? So they've cleared this first hurdle now. Talk about next steps. How do they go about finding some of these people who would be eligible for reparations in California?
Well, that's the big question, right? Ultimately, they went with the existential spirit of why the panel was formed in the first place. So lineage and genealogy, specifically limiting compensation to descendants of free and black enslaved black people who were in the U.S. in the 19th century. You laid that out. The argument is simply that it would hold up better in a conservative Supreme Court or have a better chance of surviving a legal challenge, all, of course, leading to that question of what happens next, and we simply don't know. So now you've decided who deserves reparations based on that lineage. How then do you decide who proves it? How do you prove it? It's not like there were records readily available to freed slaves along with this system of preservation. So for a lot of families, mine included, our history is like a blurry mess, or more likely like a black hole. If you go back far enough, are you going to tell me that millions of black families should hire a genealogist or take time off work to dig through? Yeah, like can you take time off work to dig through federal documents with what, like cross-referencing your slave name? It's a mess. And then you have to decide what the best system of compensation looks like. Is it a direct payment to families? Is it college tuition? Is it student loan forgiveness, business grants, home buying assistance? We just don't know yet. It's a question that's really complicated as deciding who's eligible in the first place, because, again, this is about justice and not just compensation. So it's a lot of aspects all blending into this one big issue. And I think the panel has a lot more work to do as they continue this.
We talk about what a big deal this is because so many people in the country are watching this. This hasn't happened at this scale before. You know, I live in Washington. On the federal level, this discussion about reparations has kind of gone nowhere. But you do have, maybe not states like California, but cities, universities taking this up, right? Talk about some of those moves that we're seeing in the minute that we have left here.
Georgetown University, Boston considering a proposal to form a reparations commission. Rhode Island formed its own commission. Detroit, where my family is, formed a task force. Evanston, Illinois, actually became the first city to make reparations available to black residents last year. But not many people are happy with what they did. So California is really this first and only state to move ahead with a plan like this. And as you said, a lot of other local governments, states, the whole country looking at what happens here to see what they need to do moving forward. Hallie.
Steve Patterson, so glad to have you on this story for us. Keep us posted because we know there's a lot more developments as you laid out on this one. Appreciate it, Steve.
Thanks.
Appreciate all you joining us for this hour. Another busy one. Who knew? We're going to have a whole lot more for you here tomorrow. Same time, same place. Thank you again for joining us. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.